Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. I really want to thank you for attending the webinar today. This is one of my favorite sessions to give. The format of this, I've done this in a half-day workshop, and I've done it in track talks at conferences for a few years. And I like talking about Agile maturity and just observing it. I think it's a continuum. So I'm not implying, please don't look at the photos on this cover slide and I think it's somewhere in between. So I think maturity is somewhere between the photo and the left, and I hope maturity is somewhere to the left of the photo on the right. So you're probably somewhere in between there. And we're going to talk about that middle ground of essential patterns of Agile maturity as we go today. And hopefully you get a sense for what mature Agile teams look like. One of the things I don't want to do is set you up with a grading system. I don't think there's a grade. There's not an evaluation. There's certainly not a CMMI level or a factor or anything like that that I think is healthy to grade your Agile adoption. The best way that I try to preface talking about these patterns is things that when I'm coaching teams, when I see one of these patterns or when I see one of these activities, it really makes me smile, usually internally. It brings a tear to the corner of my eye. It's something that I think of as the team is on their way to maturity. So it's just sort of a cumulative, observation, a very positive thing that I'm seeing in teams. And I started capturing these things. Again, you don't want to grade. There is no 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, factor. But you do, I think they are useful, that you should be looking as your teams mature from a coaching perspective, from an Agile perspective. You should empathize and see some of these patterns emerging from your team. And again, the whole notion of a pattern is behaviors or things that are good. So in this case, they're not anti-patterns, but they're patterns. They're things you should look for, things that are indicators of goodness or maturation in the teams. I want to start by talking about three common, I don't know if they're meta patterns, but three topics to get your juices flowing. One, achieving Agile maturity. One of the observations I have as a coach is many teams seem to have this false sense of over maturity. I can't tell you how often I encounter a team and, we in our initial dialogue, they're like, well, we're Agile. We've been doing this for a year or two. There's nothing we can learn. Just let us alone. We are fully mature. We are a fully capable Agile team. And when I look under the covers and I look at patterns and I attend and observe, maybe I'm doing some coaching or assessing, I find that they're not as mature as they think they are. I think teams, so there's that tendency to be full of yourself a little bit, and we just need to be self-aware of that. Teams can become complacent or they plateau. I see this pattern often where teams are accelerating for a little bit of time and then they flatten out. They're not continuously improving. They're not continuously maturing. I think it's because it's hard. It's hard to continuously improve. Sometimes you even see regression over time where a high-performance team or a high-maturity team starts regressing. And then sometimes you can have too much self-direction. And what I mean by that is there is this notion in Agile of a self-directed team, and that's good. You want teams to be empowered and you want them to be self-directed, but at the same time, you don't want this model where the inmates, particularly if they're uninformed or unskilled or immature inmates, running the asylum. So, having some coaching, have some guidance, having some leadership isn't necessarily a bad thing. Providing some guardrails to Agile teams isn't necessarily a bad thing. So, achieving maturity is this continuum, and I think you want to be sensitized to those factors. A second point is the methods. I think something that gets in the way of Agile sometimes is that it's inherently so simple, and that's good, and I think it can also be bad. So doing Agile is very easy. There's this notion of doing versus being Agile. Doing is sort of going through the tactics. For example, having a daily stand-up to me would be a tactical doing Agile activity, versus being Agile is much harder, and it falls into this continuous improvement. So having a stand-up could be doing, having a really effective stand-up that's balanced, that's well facilitated, that's on point, that's asking the right questions, that's focused on sprint goals and focused on value, that's engaging product owners, et cetera, that's looking at the data, that's being transparent. That's different. That's being Agile, and that's a continuous process. So I think sometimes it's inherent I hear a lot from organizations or from teams, oh, we've read a book or we've read a white paper and we've been doing it for a few weeks. Just we don't need any outside help or any coaching. We've sort of got it. And I agree with that on the one side, that doing Agile is easy, so you can get that from the white papers and a few books. But the being is much more difficult. So go ask for help. And this isn't a sales pitch, but I think don't get fooled by the simplicity of the methods. Go get some internal coaching or external coaching. Go get some experience. Join an Agile group in your local community. But don't get fooled by the simplicity of the methods on the surface. And then one of the keys here is internally retrospectives just rock. And retrospectives are key, so having them and having incredibly powerful retrospectives, not by-road retrospectives, are crucial for continuous improvement. And then externally, like I said, get that compatible coach or get that that external set of eyes that has some seasoning, that has some chops when it comes to Agile experience. And then the third area is the culture. You see this in version 1 is a pretty popular tool, and they do an annual Agile assessment or a survey, and they talk about culture being one of the largest failure factors. And so, Scrum can be quite disruptive sometimes, and Kanban might be less so. So not getting stuck in what Agile are we can be helpful. Be cognizant of the cultural implications, being cognizant of, all-in strategies versus incremental adoption strategies. Salesforce is, the commitment model they had, they went all in, and they're an example of that. And there's trade-offs associated with that. And then how do you handle the term commitment from a culture perspective? Committing to sprints, is that the word you want to use, or is forecast the word you want to use? And you hear this in the Scrum community. But being cognizant of culture and guiding that adoption are the 3 meta patterns of what I want you to think about. Is the challenge of culture, the challenge of the simplicity of the methods, and the challenge to be self-aware, and the challenge to not get too full of yourself. And I mean that in a positive way. It's okay to be confident. Doing Agile versus being Agile, I alluded to this earlier. It's a debate. It's an ongoing, it's not a debate so much, but it's a discussion point of doing focuses on tactics and ceremonies and techniques versus being focuses on behavior and mindsets at a leadership level and at a team level. It focuses on, multi-tiering. Is the organization adapting versus our teams adopting? Or is the organizational transforming? So you want to be sort of thinking, you want to be leaning. So from a maturity point of view, I think leaning towards being is our goal. And being is a moving target, so you don't become this perfect Agile machine. I've been doing, I've been adopting and practicing Agile, not just coaching it and teaching it, but I've been in the trenches for probably 12 or 13 years, and I don't consider myself done. I don't think I'll ever consider myself done or fully Agile. I'm continuously learning. I have that, that open sort of engaging mindset, and I think that's a big part of the point here. So let's dive into some of these patterns. The sooner, as you can see, we have 20 of them, so we have a lot of room. We have a lot of room to cover. And we have to see what our velocity is over time here. So hopefully I can maintain a consistent velocity and finish this webinar within the constraints so that Michael doesn't yell at me or something like that. So there's a list of 20 patterns that we're going to go through. I have them loosely grouped in some related areas. I'm not going to read this for you, but this is sort of the roadmap of where we're going. So the first grouping is technical patterns. I want to talk about just a handful. And again, I'm not talking, here I'm not going to be talking about code reviews or pair programming or something. I mean, I could probably have 20 technical patterns, but this is a handful, and each of these areas are, a handful of things, going back to what I said, that make me smile when I see teams getting the